For people who are joining who don't know about the Housing First Europe Hub, the Hub is a network of organizations, foundations, housing providers, cities, government ministries, Housing First networks and platforms themselves, as well as researchers and others working together to promote a systemic change of homelessness policy by upscaling and developing housing first based policies and practices. So this series is designed to bring together practitioners of Housing First, or people who are looking to start Housing First and have some questions, looking to transition services to a Housing First approach, and to bring practitioners together to talk about their own experiences and to deepen their knowledge based on the learning and experience of our colleagues around Europe and beyond. We have contacts that we work with closely in Canada and the US and Australia. So we're Housing First Europe, but we also have connections beyond Europe's borders. So it's always really fascinating to bring people together from the different levels as well. So people might be frontline workers or managers or people doing evaluations of Housing First services. So we peer workers, all kinds. So we really want this to be a space where people can share their own experiences and really deepen their knowledge based on the research that others have done or on their experience of others working in Housing First. So today's session is entitled Restoring Dreams to Tackle Loneliness. And I will not go into the details of that. I will leave that to our fantastic presenters. Today, we have 4 presenters with 3 presentations. So I will introduce everybody now, and then I will hand over to our first presenters. So our speakers today are Tessa Hamers, who is a project leader at the Center of Expertise on Housing First. She works there with HVO Querido, and she works to combat homelessness with support from the Housing First model. She's working also in the Housing First Netherlands platform to try and share this knowledge across the Netherlands and bring her colleagues together on these topics. She's presenting today with Viola Stekelenburg, I hope I said that right, who is the coordinator at the City of Amsterdam for HVO Querido, and has also been working very much as a facilitating as a connector between the client, the social worker, and the partners involved, in particular in Amsterdam. So following their presentation, we'll have a presentation from Marek, sorry, my paper's backwards, from Marek Mikulec. Sorry, I'm very bad at Polish lessons. Can you pronounce it for me, Marek?
Mikulec.
Mikulec. Wow, I was really gone the wrong direction on that. Sorry about that. Marek is a researcher, experienced researcher, and interested in topics including social work, social housing, and homelessness. And he's assistant professor at the Faculty of Social Studies at the University of Ostrava. And finally, our final presenter today will be Dimitar, who is works in the field of social protection and healthcare, and is currently working with a civic association for the assistance of socially disadvantaged families. The organization association is called Kindness, and it's based in Skopje. And he's the author of several published studies and research, and a co-author of draft laws on social entrepreneurship. So I will hand over to our speakers, and I'll just say what we'll do is we'll run the presentations sort of hopefully seamlessly from 1, 2, and 3. Please ask as many questions as you like in the chat. And what we'll do is we'll come back at the end of the session, at the end of the presentations, and engage in a discussion and dialogue based on the questions. So do write your questions in the chat as they come up, but we will come to the questions for the question and answer and discussion session after the presentations. So thank you very much. And I will hand over now to Tessa and Viola.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Tessa.
I'm Viola. Hi.
We will start our presentation. Today we will tell you a little bit about our project. It's called Restoring Dreams to Tackle Loneliness. Me and Viola will tell something about what loneliness means and what we developed in the last few years. And Dimitar and Marek will tell you a little bit about the outcomes that we have, that has been from the research that we conducted.
Yeah, and we would like to invite everybody to take a piece of paper, if possible, and a pen, because at the end of our presentation, we will do a small little task, which we would like everybody to contribute. It's very little. You just need a pen and a paper, A4 paper and a pen, and we will be up and running. So yeah, Tessa already introduced me. I work for HVO Querido. HVO Querido is a care organization in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. We give support through different target groups and different ways of housing. So we do individual housing, we do the night shelters, the 24-hour shelters, we have family homes. We work with youngsters, immigrants, we work with people with mental problems, with addictions. We work with people with prostitution, families, but also rough people, people on the street, still living on the street. At the moment, we have about 1,200 clients living in individual homes in Amsterdam throughout the Housing First methodology.
Yeah. And I work for the Center of Expertise, Housing First, where we provide workshops, training, and everything that's connected to Housing First. And for us, most important is that the motivation comes from the client, and that eventually leads to success. And that's also an important part of our project. Before we start the presentation, we want to show you a documentary that has been made about our project.
Eenzaamheid voelt als verbanning.
Eenzaamheid is bijna een taboe soms. Terwijl eenzaamheid is er zoveel. Als je kijkt naar Amsterdam zelf, we hebben 46% van de Amsterdammers voelt zich wel eens eenzaam. Waarbij 13% extreem eenzaam. Dat betekent dat wij ongetwijfeld allemaal iemand kennen, of meerdere, die extreem eenzaam zijn. Ja, dat maakt mij wel verdrietig, denk ik. Tineke is een hele sterke vrouw, dat vooropgesteld.
Ik ben betrokken bij een project wat gaat over eenzaamheid.
Klanten die daar aanspraak op kunnen doen, zijn vaak klanten die voortijdig in de 24-uursopvang hebben gezeten, langdurig dakloos zijn geweest, vanuit klinieken komen. Tineke is na een lange periode van dakloos zijn, heeft ze uiteindelijk haar eigen stek gevonden en gaat het goed met Tineke.
Ik heb een goede schoolopleiding gehad, maar in sociale academie. Ik ben eigenlijk hulpverlenster zelf ook, van beroep. Rond mijn 30ste, ik ben nu 62, heb ik ontdekt dat ik borderliner ben. Hypomane buien, dus of hyper, weet je, high in the sky, of deep down low. Want toen kwamen de duidelijkste problemen voor het eerst naar boven. Als Roberto, mijn vriend, als die bijvoorbeeld de hele dag weg is of veel langer wegblijft dan hij had gezegd. En of als ik hem niet kan bereiken of zo telefonisch. Dan kan ik me wel eens in zeg dat, nou ja, moeite hebben met een dag gewoon goed te besteden.
Ja, als je mensen vraagt, wat heb jij nou echt nodig? Iemand dakloos op straat bijvoorbeeld. Kijk, de basisbehoefte is natuurlijk op dat moment een huis en voedsel, een bad. Maar als je kijkt in iemands hart, dan zegt iemand misschien wel een knuffel, begrip. Een ander, een schouder om op te huilen of juist om mee te lachen. En ik denk dat we dat wel eens vergeten in onze maatschappij.
Maar dan is het heel goed, denk ik, als er mensen naar jou toe komen.
Ja, we komen eenzaamheid heel veel tegen. Ja, we zijn nu bezig met een onderzoek in Amsterdam. Onderzoek bij onze klanten van HVO Querido, een Housing First project. Daarbij zien we dat meer dan 90% van de klanten eenzaam zijn. Op het moment dat deze mensen een woning krijgen, dan in het begin is het allemaal heel mooi en heel fijn. En heel, je krijgt je basis terug waar je gewoon je bestaansrecht. Maar in de loop der tijd merk je dat mensen ook gewoon alleen zijn in hun woning. En dan kan je als hulpverlener langskomen en je kan heel veel tools proberen aan te reiken. Maar dat eenzaamheid buiten de kantoortijden haal je niet weg bij mensen. En het verschil tussen een 24-uursopvang met 60 man en alleen een woning is heel erg groot.
Ik was heel erg bang om vanuit die psychiatrische inrichting weer een zelfstandige woning te betrekken. Omdat ik bang was voor dezelfde problemen die ik vroeger altijd had gehad natuurlijk. Ik denk dat iedereen als basis alleen of met meerdere mensen samen een huis nodig heeft om de rest van zijn leven vorm te geven.
We kennen allemaal vast wel de buurman die 2 straten of 2 deuren verderop woont, die eigenlijk misschien nooit iemand spreekt. Of de verre nicht die je nog hebt, waarvan je weet dat ze het misschien best wel moeilijk heeft. Ik denk als wij in ons eigen netwerk gaan kijken, dat we zo een paar mensen bij elkaar kunnen gaan halen die eenzaamheid ervaren. En hoe mooi zou het zijn om daar een lans te breken en daar gewoon aan de deur te staan. En eens te vragen of gewoon te luisteren om te zien wat iemand nodig heeft.
Dit project helpt omdat ik weer nieuwe mensen tegenkom en omdat ik het fijn vind om samen aan te werken aan het project tegen eenzaamheid.
Vorig jaar op 1 november hebben wij binnen Housing First HVO Querido meer dan 1000 mensen gehuisvest.
En als ik maar aandacht krijg, aandacht, dan is het goed. Dus ja.
Rondom eenzaamheid heb je niet kant-en-klaar een oplossing. Maar het feit, we moeten het daarom niet negeren. We moeten daarom wel bewust zijn van het feit dat het er heel veel is. En dat we daar wel wat mee moeten.
Alle beetjes helpen gewoon.
Yes, so this was a small movie. It's made about 2 years ago at the start of our project. And I already said within the movie that there is no ready-made solution for homelessness. For loneliness. Loneliness is very subjective and therefore it's hard to catch. Because there's no ready solution and social workers generally always like to fix problems. And to loneliness, it's very hard to fix the problem because loneliness is not easy to fix. So I would like to share a few facts with you. One of them is that loneliness is the same feeling subjectively as being extremely hungry and thirsty. Loneliness can eventually lead to a depression, and loneliness is more deadly than obesity and leads to death. It also, some who do not have an intimate relationship is not per definition lonely, and somebody being alone also does not mean you are lonely. The fact is, each day the group of lonely people is still growing in population. And youngsters, this is also quite interesting. Youngsters, we think that youngsters are not lonely. Well, in fact, is after a lot of research that came out, the youngsters are the second group of lonely people. The first one are the elderlies, and the second one are the youngsters to the age of 25. So I will take you into the levels of loneliness. So this is a small little task I would like to, or a small little practice exercise I would like to do with you. Imagine there are 3 categories of loneliness. You have emotional loneliness, social loneliness, and you have collective loneliness. So imagine you're standing alone and draw a little circle around you. So that little circle around you is the emotional loneliness. And that defines, if you are in the emotional loneliness, it means you are missing a close partner, somebody you're very close with. It could be your partner, your married partner, but it could also be your best friend if there's no partner, or a very strong family member. That's your first line of loneliness. Then you have a second line of loneliness. So another circle, it goes a little bit further away from you. The second circle of loneliness is a little further away from you and defines social loneliness, which is a group of friends, family members, close family members, people where you share fun, but also grief with. They are the ones who are there for you when you need them, who you can call, and who are close enough to you. So if you don't have that second circle, you miss social loneliness. Then the last circle, which is the furthest away from you, is collective loneliness. And collective loneliness is something that is impacted also on emotional loneliness. But imagine you're a stranger in a foreign country, or it's like you go to school and you don't feel like you're fitting within the society of school. It's a bigger group of loneliness. So the first one, again, is emotional loneliness, really affects people if it's not there. Then you have social loneliness, which is more the base of your environment and the people who are always there for you. And then you have collective loneliness.
Well, everyone feels lonely sometimes. We all know the feeling, like someone passed away, your relationship ended. For many reasons, we know the feeling of loneliness, but most of us will come out after a few days. They stay home and then everything gets better. But some of us don't. Well, there are a lot of different reasons why people feel lonely. It can be created by personal factors, health factors, major life events, or it can even be policy choices in healthcare while people feel more lonely. Well, it becomes a problem when it stays and it persists for a long time. If you cannot figure it out yourself, or if it's experienced as severe, for example, if it influences your work or your mental health. Well, what happens if someone feels lonely? He withdraws, he pulls back, he wants to hide as long as possible. You can imagine, for example, you want to celebrate your birthday and no one is there. You also feel bad. Maybe you feel sad that no one is there, but then after a few days you think everything is okay and you will organize a birthday party and everything is fine. But if this happens day after day, week after week, people withdraw even further and they feel bad. They get more negative thoughts, and one moment negative thoughts overrule, and that's why people end up in this spiral of loneliness. Well, if this happens, then it can lead to a lot of problems. The client's behavior will change. They can get into depression, dementia, addiction can grow, and it can even happen that the chances of strokes go up. They get a high blood pressure, heart problems, and sleeping problems. On this picture, you see Hans. He's one of our clients, and he also felt very lonely. And we tried to figure out with him what was the cause of his problems. And then we realized his network was very little. So he found a dog, and this dog made the feeling of loneliness very lot less for him. So this is one of our examples.
It gave meaning in life, and it was very beautiful to see how somebody can grow so quickly by being very lonely, and all of a sudden there was a day program, there was somebody who took care of him and he took care of, and it was very pretty to see how the quality of life grew immensely by having an animal. So I'm going to take you a little bit into the results of the country of Holland. In the Netherlands, the health organization conducts a population screening every 4 years, and they measure also the topic loneliness. Also all other meaningful topics, but loneliness is one of them. The last investigation has been in 2016. And the score of loneliness within Amsterdam in the Netherlands, a city of 1 million inhabitants, was 46% of the population of Amsterdam felt lonely. Then they also investigated the extreme loneliness, which means, which I described before, the 3 circles of loneliness. The extreme loneliness conducts all the circles of loneliness. So 13% in Amsterdam said to be extremely lonely, which is quite a high number. And then our clients within the Housing First methodology who live in individual housing with either double or single diagnosis, they said that more than 97% felt extremely lonely. That's a much higher number than the average in Amsterdam. So there is a lot of work to do on the scale of loneliness and to work towards a solution or a better quality of life in the topic of loneliness. Oh, yeah, the last one. Well, the last one is that within Housing First,
within our target group, 47% of people felt extremely lonely, and compared to the Dutch one, it's also double. So it's a lot. Yeah. Well, I will take you to a loneliness scale because for the population screening, we used the scale of De Jong and Gierveld. And she is a scientist in Holland, a professor that did research for more than 40 years. And the scale is used all over the world. Even in Kazakhstan, they do research about loneliness with this scale. Within our project, we had 7 countries who contributed to the project Restoring Dreams to Tackle Loneliness. And in every country, we did the research, and here you can see an overview of how many people felt lonely. In Czech, it was 98%, and from that, 49% felt extreme lonely. In Spain, 98% felt lonely, 49% extreme lonely. Macedonia, 100% lonely, where 63% felt extremely lonely. Hungary was 90% and 45% extremely lonely. And then in Belgium, 100%, where 32% felt extremely lonely. And in France, also 100% lonely, 43% of that's extremely lonely. Well, Marek and Dimitar will tell you more about the outcomes of this research. As you can see, all the countries have a high number of loneliness in common. Most of the countries that were working with the project are working with vulnerable people that are dealing with homelessness. 5 out of 7 countries work with Housing First. The other 2 work with homeless people in the night shelter, 24-hour settings. And in every country, almost half of the people are extremely lonely. So the numbers are really high, and yet, at least for the partners that were in the project, we didn't do much about the feeling of loneliness. So this is for us a very important reason why we've created a training program. And the training program exists of 5 different models. The first one is awareness, and awareness is more about what does loneliness mean, what are the causes, what are the fears for people. Well, what are the causes of loneliness? There are like two important models, upgrading self-esteem and upscaling the network, that are focused on fixing loneliness. Like some people feel lonely because they don't have social skills, while other people feel lonely because they don't have a network around them. So those 2 models are mainly focused on fixing the problem of loneliness. But we realized, I think, very quickly in the project, that loneliness is not something that can be fixed easily. So what's even more important is to find a way to deal with the feeling of loneliness. So the last 2 models are focused on find meaning in life, because we found out if people find meaning in life, the feeling of loneliness goes down. And the last model is about restoring dreams, where you focus in giving support about how to restore the dreams that they had when they were little, and if they can follow their dreams, the feeling of loneliness gets less as well.
Yeah, to have a we call it in Dutch, we call it a dot on the horizon. I don't know if it translates to English, but to have something to work towards to, and very often that not only succeed into a better way of living, but it also succeed into getting like certain things done and meeting new people and having going towards something. So that's why we believe in restoring dreams to tackle loneliness.
Yeah, and we are always trying to work differently, and we put theory into practice. Today we would like to show you one tool that's called the spider web.
Yeah, but that later, because we're first going to talk about the blue zones. Probably people have already heard of the blue zones, and if not, it's a very interesting thing to dig into, because there are 5 places in the world where people live very well, and they reach over an age of 100 years old. So that's quite interesting. So those places are, they did a little research, of course, on it. So how can we achieve such a high number of average age, and how can people live so well and feel their life is so in quality and positive, and so people are energetic. So what do they all have in common? Well, they all have in common that they move into a natural way. And that everybody is part of the right tribe. So they belong to something. They either belong to a social group, or they belong to their family. They feel like so they're not lonely, and they feel they're they found their meaning with belonging to the right tribe. Very importantly is they eat wisely. What does that mean, to eat wisely? It means that you eat 95% plant-based, and you eat only up to 80%. So very often we eat, and we like it, but the more we get fulfilled to 100% is not good for our body. So the moment we eat up to 80%, apparently it contributes to growing older. They also work they work and they have something meaningful to do in life. So there are very little obstacles, and life moves forward in a very peaceful way. That means people are they're not bored. They have enough time, but they move naturally. I think it's very interesting to dig into the blue zones. They're all related, actually, which I found, which has not been given in the research, but they're all next to the ocean. What I found interesting, I thought immediately, they eat all fish and they live like the island culture, but that doesn't come true. It's more like move naturally, the right tribe, eat wisely, and the right lookout, and have purpose in life. So positive health. So I'm giving you a small introduction about the spider web that Tessa will actually start working on with you. But positive health is a development of 6 different dimensions of health. And instead of looking towards the health from a medical dimension, that's mainly what has been done in our health system, because we are mainly focusing on some health or some sicknesses. This focus on something, on some positive health, and is mostly focused on prevention rather than getting sick. We're one step ahead in preventing not to get sick. Positive health is not only looking at the medical problems, but also looks at an emotional and social challenge in life. And that gives a bigger view of health. Within the Housing First model, we're using the positive health with our clients, and that gives a beautiful and positive results. So people really enjoy fitting this in, because we're not focusing on what not goes well or where they score lower than average. We're just focusing on their life at the moment and what works well for them. And it also shows them emotional and social challenges in life, which we can work on towards the future. So it's a very interesting and very powerful tool to use, which we will show to you soon. But first, this is going to explain the last sheet.
Yes. Well, in the 20s in Holland, the Public Health Organization, they started a research among different layers of society. And they asked them, what does health mean to you? They asked patients, healthcare providers, citizens, policymakers, insurers, and researchers. And in this graphic, you can see the results. And as you can see, the different layers of society gave different importance to the different dimensions. As you can see on the left, the body functions, everyone agrees that health means that you have something physically happening to you. But if you look, for example, at mental functions or spiritual dimension or social participation, then you see that mostly patients, they score very high, but researchers or healthcare providers, they think it's less important. Yes, it's very interesting. In Holland, we have this discussion now what does help mean? And is help mean that you want someone to help them when they're sick? Or do you want to prevent people to become sick and stay healthy? Well, this is one of the reasons this tool has been created. And we want to invite you to fill in the spider web. Although I'm also looking at the time, we're already over our time. So I would invite you to fill in the spider web after the webinar, because it can give you a view where you stand in life.
Yeah.
So what do? You score on every level. You score yourself 0 till 10. So 10 is the highest. You feel healthy, you feel fit. And 0 is very low. So on every level you fill in a score, and then you connect the dots with each other. And then in the end, you have your own spider web. And it's really interesting to fill in this form once every 6 months to see, have you grown or did you went down? And finally, my last thing, and then we will stop. With loneliness, it's very interesting because most clients, they don't want to talk about loneliness. So this tool can help you, because with social participation, loneliness is that part of the spider web. It believes that if you work on other pillars, then the feeling of loneliness goes down as well. So, for example, someone doesn't want to lose weight, but you focus on another pillar, maybe they become more healthy and they lose weight instead. So
it's very powerful. I would like to, before we end it, I would really like to invite everybody after this, very small, because we can talk about it forever, and we really believe in this spider web, especially because we're using it already for 2 years with our clients, and we see such positive results, and it gives a very simple, like, viewpoint of where you can work on and what is the problem. I would really like to invite everybody to fill it in for yourself, because it gave me a little bit of an insight of my own life where I struggle with, which I didn't know. So it's just very interesting, and then you can see if it works for you, yes or no. There's also a website. It's called www.positivehealth. I think there's even an English button, so you can click on it. You can also fill it up online. And it also explains more and more. The Dr. Machteld Hubers, who invented this, by the way, who got the promotion on it, she also has like a lot of tutorials and small TED Talks about how it works and what it actually gains. So that to say about positive health.
Yeah. And now I will give the word to Marek, because we are way over our time.
Sorry for this.
Yeah. It's okay. I'll just come in to say thank you. I think it was really fascinating, and don't worry, we still have time, and we can spill over a little bit if we want. But I really think it was really important to also end on this very positive note, and we can make sure that we send this and maybe the link to that website out to everybody who's attending the website. So super. We also have lots of time in the webinar, but just I know some people might have to leave right at the top of the hour. But indeed, can we go on to Marek, and then we'll come back for questions. I'm sure there will be more questions, and please pop them into the chat as we go along. So thank you both really very much. Are you ready, Marek?
Yes, I'm ready, and you should see my presentation. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and as Samara said, I'm from the University of Ostrava, and also from the Statutory of Ostrava, where I work as methodologist of social housing. From Czechia, a platform for social housing was participating in that project, and I will present you qualitative data. This is the content of the presentation. The whole data is richer than we can look on just now because of time, but I will show you general framework, and there is an email contact on me, so feel free to write or have some questions in discussion during this webinar or after that webinar. First round of data collection was happening between June and November 2019. And from the qualitative analysis, we had almost 400 clients. That means data from almost 400 clients across the 7 participating countries, organizations. And from the second round, it was happening during August and December 2020. And we had more than 150 clients, and also around 100 social workers was involved into the qualitative research. You can see big difference between 400 and 150 clients. It was happening because of COVID-19 pandemic. For example, in Czechia, it it was behind the massive dropout because Czechia was worst in COVID during that period. You can see 7 participating countries. It was very, very interesting to analyze that and look on the data because behind these countries, there are differences in social system, in experiences with social housing and all of that. Qualitative data were analyzed using with thematic analysis according to Brown and Clark, and also we're creating a position map. So that is the diagram. And you can see that clients may or may not experience the feeling of loneliness and social isolation. That diagram shows that COVID-19 pandemic increased experience of loneliness and also social isolation. So it worsened a lot of clients' situation. But now we can go on the clients and social workers' perspective via qualitative data. So firstly, this is data from the first round. We asked clients when they experienced loneliness. Mostly it was closely connected with the loss of someone important. Very often because of death, break in relation, or rejecting by other people. That means there were some struggles, some bad relations, and clients feel that they were rejected within this relation. Experience with loneliness was closely connected with specific life space and also with specific life experiences. With specific life space, that means that they live on the street, in a social services, mostly shelters. They have experience with psychiatric hospital, prison, and also experience with moving to a new apartment and the situation that they are in a new place and they feel lonely in that new place. And in specific life experiences, it means they had experiences with abusing and with domestic violence in the past. What is also important to say that some informants labeled themselves as loners. So that means they experience loneliness during their whole life. Intensity was different, but during the whole life. So next slide, and we are still in a first round of collecting data. We asked clients on how they struggle with loneliness. So their past strategies and also their current strategies. That means it's a situation when they open the topic with their social worker. And they define functional strategies. That means escape strategies, which can be negative, like alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. So some tool how to negatively escape the loneliness, and also some positive strategies, some positive functional strategies like reading books, watching TV, listening music, listening radio. It was connected with experiencing some fun, calm, and relax, feelings of being relaxed. Also, functional strategies was strategy of survival and reduction emotions, strategy of help to the others, being important for someone other. Also, physical strategies of reduction loneliness and strategy of gaining social and professional support. It was very important. According to clients' answers, social worker was very, very important person which can help solving loneliness, struggling loneliness. Clients also named some unfunctional strategies. It was very often connected with having bad relations with wrong people, with some false friend, someone who go to some kind of negative way into their lives. Also, unfunctional strategies was strategy of doing nothing. Someone will save me, someone will do something after me. And current strategies, we are still in 2019, but after the situation when they opened the topic of loneliness with their social worker. So greater focus on daily related regimes. So some kind of activities which they repeated daily, some programs which can fulfill their day. Gaining positive reflections with an experience of partial success. And important thing was housing flat as element of life stabilization. So now we are looking on second round, data from second round, and COVID-19 pandemic and the topic of loneliness. Clients and also social workers mentioned a range of quality positions. For the perspective of clients, it was very often re-establishing contacts with family, finding a life partner, situation of being supported by neighbors. We'll talk about neighborhood later on. Experiencing solidarity among neighbors, so important part for the neighborhood in solving loneliness of the client during the pandemic. Also, clients reflected that during lockdown, it was very, very difficult to maintaining the contacts. It was very challenging. And social workers and also clients reflected that absence of everyday contacts with the environment through small talk dialogues with contact with the neighbors was very important part of that. Social workers reflected that loneliness has deepened among those clients who tended to have distanced themselves already before the pandemic. So if the clients have problem with loneliness, struggling with loneliness before the pandemic, it was much worse during the pandemic. What was closely connected with that topic was cooperation of social worker and the client, because a lot of whole cooperation have to shift to the online and to the cell phone contacts and so on. So clients and also social workers reflected problem of digital exclusion, because some clients haven't access to cell phone, to notebook, to the internet. So it was extremely difficult to stay in touch with the social workers and client, these relations without that access. Also, clients reflect a certain feeling of freeze because they have some achievement, they get a flat, they cooperate with social workers, they are working on something, for example, looking for a job or something like that. But during that freeze, some of them lost their job. They cannot continue on the way of some small successes which they started. So they also reflected it. Very important is social housing. That means that clients and also social workers reflected very positively the opportunity to be at home during the pandemic. So have that possibility, be at home during the lockdown, have that all background, has their own safe space. And yes, and also what Tessa and Viola said, the tabuization of loneliness. So both clients and social workers reflected that because of COVID-19, loneliness become important topic in public discussion and how to work with that. So that project was happening in very important times. What are the supporting factors in loneliness? The ownership of the animal, we can see that on a picture. It was also reflected by the clients and social workers. Have a cat or dog, because clients can take care about someone, be important for someone. Also important part was the contact with the neighbors and re-establishing contacts with the family, because of COVID and all of what was happening, they can reflect the importance of all these relations with the family. Very important was the regime factor. During the lockdown, have some daily regime, have to do during the day, but there were a thin line between regime factor on a positive way of thinking and the killing monotony, which was also reflected by the clients. Some clients reflected spirituality as important part of how to thinking, how to struggling about the loneliness and the relationship with some higher power, in that case with the God. And clients also self-reflected, and it was interesting, worsened alcohol and drug abuse during pandemic. Project recommendation. Clients and also social workers stressed the importance of the project and reflected as very supportive in their struggle against loneliness, that it gave them tools how to solve the loneliness, how to work with the clients, how to open the topic. It helped also opening the taboo of the topic, that means the tabuization of the topic of loneliness, and importance of social work in social housing, because clients reflected that it was extremely important to having someone who show a regular interest in me. And last slide, importance of the project in the level of tabuization and improving clients' life situation. As I said, importance of social housing, have some safe place, some home. And according to responses, clients and social workers, we can look on the tackling loneliness on 3 levels, micro levels, improving, building clients' self-esteem and self-confidence. Some meso level, that means the level of neighborhood, offer of help within the neighborhood, sense of belonging, good relations with the neighbors, some kind of daily interactions. And macro level, again, sense of belonging, but to the community, society level. And importance of social work on all the 3 levels, looking not on a client only at home, but looking on a client in environment. So thank you. And I can stop sharing, and Dimitar, you can continue with the quantitative data.
Thank you, Marek. That was excellent. And wow, and very lots of fantastic info in a very concise and easy to understand way. Thank you, really. Thank you very much. Yeah, Dimitar, can we hand over to you?
Hello again from me for those who joined late. While Marek presented the results of the qualitative part of the research, I am going to present you the results of the quantitative analysis. So first, about the design of the research. The main research problem was the lack of knowledge and data to understand the phenomenon of loneliness in partner countries and beyond. We know that the loneliness as a social phenomenon is insufficiently studied and documented. This is the case worldwide, and in many countries there is no data on loneliness at all. The objectives of the research component of the projects were to measure the loneliness of our clients, to assess the knowledge and competence of our social workers on the issue of loneliness, and number 3, to determine the effectiveness of our project on loneliness. The methodology used was to gather data on 2 separate surveys through the technique of direct interview. The sample of the survey consisted of 2 convenient samples, 1 for each of the surveys. One of them was composed of employees of our organizations and was distributed among the partner organizations, where each of the organizations had to interview at least 20 of its employees, while the second sample consisted of our clients, and each of the partner organizations was initially delegated to interview 40 of its clients. The research was longitudinal with 2 measure points 1 year apart from each other. The second measure point was taken in during the period between August and December 2020, while the first measure point was in the second half of 2019. So there was a year between the points of measurement. It was previously agreed upon that in the second measure point we are going to survey only the same people who participated in the survey at the first measure point. And both questionnaires were modified relative to the ones used in the first measure point to include the questions regarding the training and tools that were part of the project. And there were also included questions about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The first point of measurement was on a sample of a total of 183 workers and 331 clients, while the second point of measurement, during the second point of measurement, the survey encompassed a total of 150 clients and 104 workers. The workers' questionnaire consisted of 34 questions, including 5-point Likert scale questions, dichotomous questions, complex questions, and also open questions. The questions were about awareness of the phenomena of loneliness, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on loneliness, about the personal participation of the workers in training modules, and about the use of various tools and techniques to fight loneliness. The client's questionnaire included a loneliness scale by de Jong and Girwilt, which consists of 11 dichotomous questions as a basic for calculation of the so-called loneliness score and level of loneliness, 1 multiple choice question about the use of tools to fight loneliness, and 4 open questions. Here is the distribution of respondents and the dropout rate. The first table is about the workers, and the second is about the clients. Distribution by countries was pretty much the same. It is worth to mention that the dropout rate between the two measure points was rather high. It was like 40, 50, 60, in some cases even up to 80%. So here is the situation about the loneliness in all countries in 2019. The customer survey of the sample of 331 clients obtained the following results. 53.7% of the respondents stated that they are moderately lonely. 27.49% of the respondents stated that they are severely lonely. 16.92% of the respondents stated that they are very severely lonely, and 2.11% of the respondents said that they are not lonely. In the next table, you can see the distribution of the levels of loneliness. According to the de Jong and Girwilt scale, there are 4 different levels of loneliness: not lonely, moderately lonely, severely lonely, and very severely lonely. In some of the countries, there were no people which were not lonely, and the highest loneliness level was in North Macedonia, where 46.51% of the respondents stated that they are very severely lonely. In this graph, we can see the mean loneliness score by countries. The highest mean loneliness score during the first point of measurement was in North Macedonia with an average of 9, followed by Spain with 7.975, the Netherlands 7.9444, France, Czechia, Hungary, while the Belgium had the lowest mean loneliness score of 6.7895. The overall average score of loneliness was 7.7553. This is the mean loneliness score disaggregated by gender. Apparently, the women were more lonely than the men, and this is by age groups. Surprisingly, the results show that the most lonely age group is the one between 41 and 50 years of age, while the least lonely are the young people, those from 0 to 30 years of age. Depending on the Housing First program, we had 2 groups of countries. Hungary, Czechia, and Macedonia did not implement the Housing First program, while the Netherlands, France, Spain, and Belgium do. And the score of loneliness was slightly higher in 2019 for for the respondents in the countries that do not implement the Housing First program. Here is the distribution of the levels of loneliness in 2020. We are now to the second point of measurement. It is similar to the one in the previous year. It is worth mentioning that in some of the countries there is an increase in the population which was not lonely, like in Spain, let's say it is more than 27%, and the overall participation of the respondents which said that they are not lonely has increased to 6.67%. So in the 7 countries together, the survey obtained the following results: that 52.67% of the respondents stated that they are moderately lonely. 37 respondents, or 24.67%, were severely lonely. 24 respondents, or 16%, were very severely lonely, and 6.67% stated that they are not lonely. The average loneliness score of the entire sample of clients during the second point of measurement in 2020 was 7.2733. The decrease of the average loneliness score compared to the previous year is significant. It is statistically important, with 0.482 in absolute amount, or relatively with 6.13%. In 5 out of the 7 countries where the research was conducted, the loneliness has decreased, with an exception of Belgium and Czechia, where the average loneliness score has increased in the year 2020 compared to the previous year. Here is the average loneliness score by countries in 2020. It was still highest in Macedonia, followed by Belgium, Czechia, Hungary, France, the Netherlands, and this time the lowest loneliness score was in Spain, where the average was 5.1818. The differences distributed by countries in the mean loneliness score in 2020 compared to 2019 were significant in some countries. The negative number in the last column shows an increase in 2020, and the increase was the highest in Belgium with 1.6272, while the highest decrease was in Spain with 2.7932. This is the mean loneliness score depending on the Housing First. Unlike the figures from the previous year, now the difference in the average loneliness score is significant, and it is much higher in the countries that do not implement the Housing First program compared to the countries that implement the Housing First program. From the previous results, we can draw the following conclusions: that there is a generally positive trend resulting from the project activities, especially of the use of tools to reduce loneliness in clients. It has indeed resulted in lower levels of loneliness in the sample of clients. Similarly, the same use of the tools with clients, together with the training modules and the trainings which were undertaken during the time frame of the project, have increased the knowledge and the confidence of our workers in their abilities to help our end users to combat loneliness. From the 2 previous points can be concluded that the specific goals of the project have been met, and that there is a positive impact from the project activities in the reduction of loneliness in the people who are homeless, who live in poverty and social exclusion. But we have to be aware that the impact has been on a small scale, only limited to a sample of several hundred people who are workers and clients of our organizations. Therefore, it would be beneficial if the experience from the project is scaled up and used in more organizations and on a larger and more varied group of end users who are potentially lonely, so that it should be implemented on other social groups also. Furthermore, the methodology used, which includes the knowledge and the tools, can even be transferred and implemented in our countries in Europe and abroad, which were not part of the original project. We recommend that there is a continuation of the project, or at the very least a continuation in the use of the tools to tackle loneliness in clients, because that would be beneficial to their socialization and to their mental health. A possibility for this kind of continuation is our future project focused on social inclusion through community living, because we believe that to fix loneliness, you don't only need to focus on the social worker or the client, but that you need the society and the network of the clients as well. And without this, we cannot fight and fix loneliness. Number 7 is that the awareness of the issue of loneliness among the general population, in the homeless persons and among other vulnerable groups, has generally increased during the time between the 2 points of measurement in all the countries participating in the survey. The influence of the pandemic of COVID-19 and the economic crisis and the measures of social distancing that accompanied the pandemic had a pronounced detrimental effect on the loneliness of our clients, as well as on the activities within the project. This influence mitigated the results of our action and made the loneliness score of the respondents within the sample in some of the countries actually increase between the 2 taken points of measurements, despite our effort and despite our actions. Furthermore, there are other unforeseen social factors which had influenced the results and were not taken into account, like in every other research in social sciences. One of those factors was the dropout rate, which definitely in some cases had influence on the results. And finally, a further research on a larger and more representative samples, and also over a longer period of time, is recommended to validate the current findings and conclusions. Okay, that is all from me. I'm looking forward to the questions and comments.
Thank you very much. Wow, it's not easy to make those sorts of very factual results, communicate them across, but you did a very good job. Thank you really very much. And I think it's important to see, like you said, how much we can see from this kind of small scale project and how important it would be to scale this sort of thing up across more services and at a much bigger scale. Thank you to all the presenters. I know we've run a little bit over time, but I think it's really important, if there are people who have questions, it would be great, since we have everybody on screen, feel free to either just raise your hand and we can let you ask a question, or to put it in the chat. The only questions I'd seen so far in the chat had been around sharing the resources that were presented. And so, yeah, absolutely, there's a link there, and we'll make sure to include that information when we send a follow-up email with the recording of today's session. So I don't know if there are any questions from the group at the moment.
Otherwise, maybe I can use the moment to share one last thing.
Of course.
Or actually 2 things I want to share, because there was in the beginning of the training, we said the youngsters were the most lonely after the elderly people. And then Dimitar shared in his results that the youngest were the least lonely. But I just want to explain that the differences between both is, the first was like in general among people, and the second one that Dimitar was sharing was specifically about our target group. So that gives an explanation why there's a difference. And I have a final question to all of you, because Dimitar already mentioned it. We are hoping to start a new project in the new year that's about social inclusion through community living. We got funding from Erasmus Plus to work on a new project. So we are searching for partners somewhere in Europe that have good examples or best practices that are connected to community living, community building, like shared, not shared housing, but shared community. So like imagine one apartment block where Housing First clients live. So if anyone thinks of something, that would be great to have their contacts.
Great. we can definitely put that out to the group, but also a bit wider in our network as well.
Great. Yeah.
I did have one question, if I can take advantage, if there aren't any jumping in, because you said like you looked at it, going right back to the beginning, you were looking at, and you said 90% of the people living in Housing First in Amsterdam felt lonely in the first sort of wave of the study. And I was just wondering, has there been any sort of similar research on people who are homeless but living in different situations? So either in temporary accommodation or shelters. Has there been a comparable project, or is this is what happens sometimes with Housing First, is we get a lot of data on Housing First because there isn't a study of the treatment as usual. So I was just curious if there's been any studies of people who are not in Housing First.
No, not yet. We are actually thinking to do a bigger research within the organization to measure the loneliness with other departments as well, but we didn't.
That's okay.
But like the countries in Macedonia and in Hungary, they did the research among the clients living in night shelter and 24-hour settings, because their Housing First is not on the map.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was curious. Thanks. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, I think it was absolutely fascinating. I'm really glad that we had opportunity to get all of the perspectives from the quantitative, the qualitative, and also come away with some really useful tools that we can all use either in our own lives or in our own work. And I think it was a fantastic collaboration on the part of all three presentations to bring session today. So I will just say thank you again to the presenters. I know it's not easy to present over Zoom. It's also not easy to present in your second or third language. So thank you very much for putting all the time and effort into making it clear and easy for us to understand, and for inspiring us as well to look at our own lives, but also to look at how we might be able to integrate some of these tools and this research into our own work. So thank you very much. And thank you to Matti for running all of the technical stuff for us. So that's been wonderful. And thanks to everybody who came to the session. We will continue to have these sessions. And if there's any topic that you think would be useful for us to address, or you yourself have a burning desire to present or point to a colleague and say they could give a presentation, that would be great, because we're really interested in keeping this sort of community of practice alive. And so please don't hesitate to send us your suggestions.